Too long indeed have these brave men, bred up amid the shock of battle, born with a sovereign who was untried in war. Too long have they labored to uphold his dubious fame. We undertake that our rule shall, in all things, be such as becomes a Gothic king, the successor of the renowned Theodoric, that man who was so rarely and so nobly qualified by nature for the cares of royalty. These were the words of Vitiges, through Cassiodorus, in a letter to the Gothic people upon his elevation to the throne. He was setting a sharp contrast between himself and the now deposed Theodahad, and promising to be a worthy leader of his people. But unfortunately for Vitiges, he had been dealt a really bad hand. He inherited a kingdom that was not prepared for invasion, and Belisarius had easily advanced all the way to Rome. Dalmatia had also fallen to the Eastern Romans, and Vitiges feared that his enemies might soon invade Italy from the north as well. The Franks, who had signed a treaty with Justinian, could at any moment take the opportunity to expand their own borders into Ostrogothic territory. And, on top of all that, Vitiges' claim to the throne was somewhat shaky. He was not a member of Theodoric the Great's Amal dynasty, and while he had the support of the Ostrogothic military, he needed to secure his legitimacy. To do this, he married Amalasuentha's daughter, Matasuentha, as soon as he arrived in Ravenna. Matasuentha was around 18 years old at the time, and was not in favor of this arrangement at all. But she didn't have a choice in the matter. The marriage took place despite her objections. To Vitiges, this was a chance to maybe kill two birds with one stone. Not only was he marrying into the Amal dynasty, but there was the slight possibility that this would bring Justinian to the negotiating table. The emperor's initial justification for going to war was to avenge the murder of Amalasuentha and to depose Theodahad, who Justinian believed had usurped the throne in her place. But now, Theodahad was dead and Amalasuentha's daughter was married to the new king. Surely this meant that there was no longer any reason for the two sides to be at war. So Vitiges sent a letter to Justinian asking for peace. If vengeance on King Theodahad be the thing required, I, who have put him to death, merit your love. If you desire to honor the blessed memory of Queen Amalasuentha, think of her daughter, who has reached, by our means, the royal station to which your soldiers might well have striven to exalt her, in order that all the nations might see how faithful you remained to the old friendship. Unfortunately, we do not know exactly how Justinian responded to this. We know that he continued the war, but we don't know his reasoning. He was in the driver's seat at this point, though, and he probably would not have accepted anything less than the surrender of the entire kingdom, which had been previously offered to him by Amalasuentha before her murder, and then again by Theodahad before he just changed his mind. But even though the plea for peace failed, Vitiges had still firmed up his claim to the throne. His next step was to appease the Franks. To Theodahad's credit, he had initiated negotiations with the Franks to try to keep them at bay, but those talks were still ongoing when Vitiges rose to power. Vitiges finalized a deal with the Franks, agreeing to pay them 2,000 pounds of gold, which was split between each of the Frankish kings. Vitiges also ceded land in southern Gaul. The Franks would not send their own soldiers to aid Vitiges, but they would send men from their subject tribes, mainly the Suevi, to bolster the Gothic ranks. Additionally, Vitiges would be able to recall the men under the command of Marcian, who were stationed in what was now Frankish territory. This gave Vitiges even more men to throw at Belisarius. And speaking of Belisarius, he wasn't just chilling back in Rome while the Ostrogoths got their acts together. He was preparing for the coming counter-offensive. He ordered a moat dug around the city of Rome and set to work at repairing the deteriorated sections of the city's walls. Belisarius also stocked Rome's granaries with shipments from Sicily and forced local Italian farmers to bring any available food into the city. He also asked Justinian to send reinforcements. Belisarius knew what was coming, and he wanted to be fully prepared. The citizens of Rome, though, were not too happy with these developments. They did not want to be the centerpiece of the war, and in fact had surrendered to Belisarius in the hopes that he would take the battle northwards, leaving them alone. But Belisarius did not have enough men at his disposal to continue towards Ravenna, so he would remain in the Eternal City, much to the dismay of the Roman citizenry. Belisarius did what he could to protect the city as much as possible. He sent Bessus to Narni, which surrendered without a fight. And he sent Constantinus to Tuscany, where he took Spoleto and Perugia. He would use these towns as outposts to potentially slow down Vitiges once the Ostrogoths decided to move south. Vitiges was still in Ravenna and awaiting Marcian when he heard of Bessus's and Constantinus's advance. And here is where he made what I think was his first mistake. Some scholars, notably J.B. Bury, have posited that Vitiges should not have left Rome in the first place, and that he should have made his stand against Belisarius, who was the most pressing threat, before moving on to deal with the Franks or any other matters. Other scholars, for instance Herrig Wolfram, point out that despite losing Rome, Vitiges was taking rapid action to improve his position and continue the war. Wolfram calls these actions, quote, the well-planned moves of a seasoned commander, unquote. And I think Wolfram is a little closer to the mark on this. Theodahad had left Vitiges in a bad spot. A tactical retreat bought him the time he needed to do what he could to keep the kingdom alive. But here, I think Vitiges jumped the gun a little bit. He knew that the Eastern Roman commanders were not all in Rome, and he hoped to strike while they were split up. He sent an army under Unulus and Pisus southwards towards Perugia. Constantinus, though, easily repelled the advance, routing the Ostrogothic forces and capturing the two generals. Unulus and Pisus were sent to Belisarius as prisoners. While this was happening, Vitiges had also sent Asinius and Uligasalis into Dalmatia with orders to besiege Salona. Asinius was to first gather up the Suevian forces that the Franks had agreed to loan out, and then meet up with Uligasalis, who moved towards Liburnia. As he advanced, he encountered an Eastern Roman force led by Constantianus. Now, hold on. I just want to make something very clear. The general leading the Eastern Romans in Dalmatia was named Constantianus. The general in Belisarius' command who moved into Tuscany was Constantinus. Constantianus, Constantinus. Very similar names, only one letter apart. But they are different guys. Constantianus defeated Uligasalis in their initial encounter, forcing the Ostrogoths to retreat. They moved into Bernus and waited for Asinius to arrive with the Suevians before they went any further. Constantianus got word of Asinius' movements and feared that he could not face the combined forces of Asinius and Uligasalis in open battle. He retreated back to Salona and prepared to face the enemy there. When the two generals grouped up, they proceeded towards Salona with their combined armies, and initiated a siege. An Ostrogothic fleet attempted to block resupply through the Adriatic, but Eastern Roman ships were able to capture or sink large portions of that fleet. The Ostrogoths were unable to maintain their blockade of the harbor, and the Eastern Romans were able to move supplies into the city with ease. Asinarius and Uligasalis maintained the siege by land, but without the fleet, their task would not be successful. Back in Ravenna, Vitiges had, by now, heard of the failure of Unulus and Pisus. He decided that he, and he alone, would be the man to lead the Ostrogothic army against Belisarius. With his army now formidable, and plenty of men under his command, he marched out of Ravenna and headed south. Rome was about to become the focal point of the Gothic War.